Folks, I want to play for you first a viral, it's meant to be viral. It's a TikTok advertisement for the Harris Walz campaign someone put together. It's on TikTok, circulating. TikTok, pretty progressive place. This speaks for itself. I want you to listen to this.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough
not
to
sure
not
about that.
ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Goodwill Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful.
That's not how my mama raised me.
I love women.
I love women who support their
Not sure
families.
about
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
And it ends with a Harris Walz play. Y'all, this comes at a time that the Harris Walz campaign has sent Tim Walz out to campaign for men, doing a series of events. He was with Michael Strahan on ABC. We'll get to that. It blew up in their faces. Did not go well. He's doing doing a couple of sports shows, talking about football, some other podcasts, and trying to get the man vote. Okay, this tells me they're losing men pretty dramatically, and the fact that they did something like that tells me they don't know how to get the men's votes. First of all, I'm not so sure about am I allowed to cast aspersions on the masculinities? A couple of people in the app. I don't know. I don't know any man who is undecided who's going to be anything other than put off by that. It's just clearly a script written by women lecturing men on what they need or need not do. Meanwhile, most men actually are interested in putting food on the table, providing for their families, and resent like hell that they're having to struggle and their wives are having to work as hard as they are as well to put food on the table for the family. And that ad does not address that. And then this comes on the heels of a Gretchen Whitmer TikTok video. It's always the TikTok videos and Instagram reels and things like that. I'm going to play this for the sake of the live stream and explain this to you. It's Gretchen Whitmer. She's in a blue outfit and she's wearing a camouflage Harris Walz cap. And there is a Indian girl in front of her with long black hair on her knees. And Gretchen Whitmer is feeding her a Dorito. That's all the ad is. And then Gretchen Whitmer looks provocatively at the camera. It's with this video in the background. Okay, first of all, I need to step back just a bit. So what the left has you believe when someone says this seems very anti-Catholic is that actually it's a viral video. It's happened from several places, and it's all about thanks. It has nothing to do with communion. It very much looks like a Catholic communion. You have the person on their knees in front of the priest who is placing the communion wafer on their mouth. They're not touching it. And in this case, it's a Dorito. And a lot of Catholics looked at this and said, wait a second. That looks like communion to me. That looks like the Lord's Supper. And the response from the left is, no, this is not meant to be anti-Catholic. This is just something people have started doing. It was a viral trend for gratitude. You know what this is like? This is very much like the Olympics, where they had the festival of the Greek gods, Dionysus, and people said, that looks like the Lord's Supper. It looks like a perverse play of the Lord's Supper. And people were saying, no, this is actually a painting about the Greek gods and the Bacchanalia. And it was a Bacchanalia, except what they missed is that Bacchanalia painting that it was based on was actually mocking the Lord's Supper. So there were two steps back. It actually was the Lord's Supper. The person on whom they based it was mocking the Lord's Supper, and they used that, and they either knew it and lied or they were ignorant. And in this case, they're saying this has nothing to do with communion in a Catholic church. This has to do with showing gratitude. So why is the girl in the pink jumper out? Why is she showing gratitude to Gretchen Whitmer for feeding her a Dorito? Now, it doesn't make any sense except to say it is a perverse twist on Catholic communion. And the point here with both the ad about men and this, that they don't know their audience. They don't know. They're trying to persuadable people. They're offending Catholics. They got men looking at them like, what the hell is this? It's all very weird and creepy. They want to call Republicans weird. That this is all very weird stuff. It's very creepy stuff. I saw a conversation online, and I'm stealing this for my own. I got to change some of the words because the guy uses the R word instead of stupid. He uses the R word. He says it actually is a statement of fact. Now, the Democrats tend to have, as a whole, a smarter by IQ class of voters. They're professionals, technologists, things like this. The Democrats aren't really the stupid party. What they are is the mentally ill party. The idiotic, identitarian-driven policies of the Democrats are largely explained by a mental illness gap, specifically with respect to anxiety and depression between Democrats and Republicans, which is larger than an IQ gap between the parties. The neurotic guilt, neuroses, and pathological empathies, the mental health issues of the Democrats, drive the worst policies of the party. The Republican Party are weighed down by their stupid people. The Democrats are weighed down by their mentally ill people. And the gap between the stupid and the smart is much narrower than the gap between the mentally healthy and the mentally ill. There's actually some truth to that, I think. Who do you want in charge? The people who have some members who believe the government can steer a hurricane to Florida? Or the people whose very leadership believes the movie Juno was actually acted out, the lead part, by a boy who pretended to be a pregnant girl, even though it was actually Ellen Page, now Elliot Page, but the leadership of the party embraces that. Who do you want? Who do you want in charge of you? The pathological neuroses of the affluent female white urban liberals who lecture you randomly in the grocery store that you're not wearing a mask 4 years removed from COVID, or the people who believe in random conspiracy theory? I would prefer not to have the conspiracy theorists in charge either, but at the upper echelons of the Republican Party, those people don't exist. The conspiracy theorists are among the fringe and the base. They're very loud, but they're not really the ones calling the shots in the party. On the Democratic side, though, it's the crazy people who are in charge. They're the business leaders. They're the insane people. The whole thing is kind of wild to me that here we are at this point in our country, and we have these insane people at the top of the Democratic Party trying to bully their neuroses onto the rest of us. And we're all supposed to treat it as normal. And when they try to relate to normal people, when they try to relate to persuadable men, they put out some weird thing like this ad that I believe I'm man enough to ask for directions. I like to eat my steak rare, and I love to vote for women and read Little Women in books that are banned. By the way, there's no conservative state banning Little Women, but they've latched on to those sorts of untruths. And by the way, the media claims that they're true because the media has these mental health issues as well. They are a bunch of neurotic people filled with anxiety and despair, and they want the rest of us to be as miserable as them. And that's translating into politics right now. Do you know Republicans actually, for the first time in a very long time, are leading Democrats in party affiliation nationally? not just state by state, but as a whole nationally, the Republicans have now moved ahead of Democrats in terms of people who identify by party affiliation. More people are willing to say I'm a Republican than a Democrat, and who can blame them when they're doing weird stuff like this? By the way, that's a really terrible sign for the Harris campaign. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he said, is this the first time that the news media privately a month before the election realizes that the Democrat is going to lose the presidency? Since Carter, I think it is. I think they know the trend lines are not good. It's not, and I want you to hear me say this. I'm not saying that Donald Trump is going to win. I'm saying if the election were held today, he would. But for the Harris campaign, you've still got about 2.5 weeks of campaigning left. And it's a close race, but a tied race benefits Donald Trump, and the trend lines are in Donald Trump's favor. And when you got the Democrats doing stuff like this, you can't help but think that these are deeply weird people who don't know how to relate to people outside their circle. And that, my friends, is a warning sign as well for you and me on the right. We have been less in a bubble than the Democrats for a very long time, but increasingly because of social media and the way people have moved around the country, increasingly we too are getting into a bubble where it makes us harder to relate. Now, thankfully, the smart, stupid gap is a lot smaller than the mentally healthy, mentally ill gap, and people don't want crazy people to be in charge of them, and they see the Democrats and they think these are a bunch of neurotic, depressed, drugged up people who can't relate to anyone. They don't want them in charge, but you got to be real careful here. You got to set your conspiracy theories aside. You got to actually smarten up here. I know they say you can't fix stupid, but I think and hope that you actually can. But these neurotic people on the Democratic Party who are surrounded by other people who are also suffering the same mental illness, they can't recognize that they're crazy. That's one reason I keep telling some Republicans you actually are stupid. You need to be aware of it so you can fix the problem. The Democrats, they're in this little bubble. They do not know that they are mentally ill, and yet they are. They are offending Catholics, claiming that this is not about Catholicism. They're historically illiterate as well. They don't know where this stuff derives from. They're trying to relate to men in ways that don't relate to men. These are not well people, and they wish to run the country. And the public generally is revolting against them because the public is looking at this nonsense saying these people cannot be in charge. When for the first time, Republicans are leading Democrats nationwide in party identification. That's a terrible sign for the Democratic Party. And that's why you got guys like James Carville out there knowing that the Harris campaign has 2.5 to 3 weeks to turn stuff around, and they don't seem to be doing it. He's getting very vocal about it. He wants to stop Donald Trump. These other people, they think they can manifest. This is the word you hear these days on social media stuff. They can manifest. They can manifest victory. You can't manifest victory when all you can do is manifest crazy. First of all, have you noticed how the Democrats now, they like to say folks. Everything is folks. And it started with Obama. Now, I say folks sometimes too, but the Democrats have really made it their thing. They don't want to say ladies and gentlemen anymore. They don't want to say y'all because that's too Southern. They say folks all the time, and a lot of it is because the gender neutrality of it. Some of them even spell it with an X instead of a KS on the end. That's true. I'm not making that up. Because it's the most gender neutral term they can use. And despite being gender neutral, Tim Walz has got to make a play for men. I mean, if there's no difference between the sexes and men can become women and women can become men, why do they have to make a play for men? But he did an interview with Michael Strahan on ABC's Good Morning America, which I don't know why you're going there in the morning for men, but that's what he did. And what he said actually caused distraction for the campaign. Listen to him state his view, makes clear it's not the campaign view, and then tries to muddy the water. But, he's just a knucklehead. That's what his fallback. I'm just a knucklehead.
I want to go back to something you said on Tuesday. You said, I think all of us know the Electoral College needs to go. But the campaign came out later that night, and they said that's not their stance. Yeah.
Well, it's not the campaign's position. And the point I'm trying to make is that there's folks that feel every vote must count in every state. Mm-hmm. And I think some of folks feel that's not the case. Our campaign does that. And the point I'm saying is I'm in 5 states in 2 days. We're out there making the case that the campaign's position is clear, that that's not their position. Their position and my position is to make sure that everybody understands their vote, no matter what state they're in, matters.
So that's something that you and Vice President Harris disagree on?
I have spoken about it in the past, that she's been very clear on this, and the campaign, and my position is the campaign's position.
Wait, she's been very clear on this, and I've been very clear on this, and her position and my position, the campaign's position is the position. What the hell is that, Tim? If she does lose this, and by the way, they're giving up on Arizona and Georgia at this point. They're focusing on the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes states. If she loses Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona, she's toast. The number of people who are going to blast Tim Walz, his career is going to be over. Her career is going to be over. And Josh Shapiro is going to be sitting pretty for 2028. But they're doing these interviews, and the interviews are not helping them. They're genuinely not helpful that he comes out and says stuff like this. I mean, the very ending of this is just wild.
And the campaign and my position is the campaign's position.
The campaign's position and my position is the campaign's position, except you went off on a dissertation on the Electoral College, which is the constitutional system. And you Democrats do need to understand this. You may want the popular vote because it helps you, but that's not the way the rules work in this country. And what you're doing is you're playing to the way you wish the system worked instead of playing to the way the system actually worked. And it's costing you everything. Here, this kind of blew my mind when I learned this. But it's true. You can do the numbers yourself. Assume that in every state, 60% of the voters turn out to vote. And in New York and California, Kamala Harris wins 75% of the vote. And in every other state, Donald Trump wins 51% of the vote. So in other words, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance win the majority, 51% majority of the vote in every state of the union except 2. And in those 2, California and New York, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win 75% of the vote. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz would win the popular vote, and they would win the election. It's why the founders in this country put in place the Electoral College, because the early states knew the most populous states would then be able to dominate everyone else, and the states are actually semi-sovereign entities. The people of Georgia have very little in common with the people in Texas, have very little common with the people in California, have very little in common with the people of Maine. So having the people of New York and California rule everyone would actually lead to the breakup of the United States. The fact that the Democrats are willing to go down this road shows how much it is about power for them. They don't really care. They just want the power. They do not want the other people in charge. The Electoral College is genius. And also the fact that we're talking about the Electoral College with 25, 24 days left. Really, you've got about 20 days left because nothing's going to get done the Saturday before the election. And James Carville's right. People are going to be distracted on Halloween. They've been distracted by the hurricane. You've got 15 to 20 days left of campaign in you. And we're talking about the Electoral College. That's a sign you're losing. So many of the things the Democrats are doing right now are signs that they're losing. You now have Democratic reinforcement money going to House races and Senate races, not Kamala Harris's campaign. Why? Because it's a sign that she's losing. She can still win. It is a tied race. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He can do something to get people off their game. And you know, the Democrats are trying very hard to convince everyone that Donald Trump is doing deeply racist things. And, you know, he is an 80-year-old man. He says things that are kind of cringy sometimes. But, you know, Kamala Harris does things that are very cringy. In fact, this is one of the things that they're upset about. This is what Donald Trump said in the Detroit Economic Forum yesterday.
I don't think anything that we're talking about today is high on her list. The whole country is going to be like, you want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands. She destroyed San Francisco. She destroyed, along with Newsom, California. And we're not going to let her do that to this country. We're not going to let it happen. So...
I mean, and they're like, oh, that's racist. He's trying to say Detroit's full of black people. That's right. No, Detroit. Have you been to Detroit? The city has completely collapsed. It's not a safe place. The amount of people who have fled Detroit, the amount of homelessness, the amount of drugs, the amount of poverty, it has just skyrocketed. It's a collapsed industrial town. Everybody there knew what he meant, and everybody was like, oh, that's just deeply racist. No, he's just telling the truth. The problem is the Democrats can't handle the truth, and they're just at this point coming up with wild, hysterical claims to try to scare people. And these stupid ads about, I'm a man and I love stink and I'm going to vote for women. That is not a winning campaign. It's playing inside your bubble. Now, what if your bubble stinks? You know, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm can wipe out those odors. All you have to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com, EdenPureDeals.com, and you, my friends, can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms and save $200. You get them for less than $200, and they wipe out odor. So ozone, it's oxygen with the third atom, O3. And what it does is it is, because of that third oxygen atom, it is attracted to charged ions, and odors are charged ions. And the way your brain detects an odor is those charged ions hit the receptors in your nose, and they release the charge, and that charge is released and your body processes as an odor. So what the ozone does is it hits the charged particle and releases one of those oxygen atoms, hits the charge, wipes it out, and the odor goes away. And you can't get into the cracks and crevices and wipe out those odors, but the O3 can. And it works. That's the genius of it. All you need to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com, put in Erick3, ERICK3. You get 3 of these. You save $200. You upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your travel bag. It wipes out the odors. You can thank me later. Kamala Harris, here at the end of the campaign season, is on the cover of Vogue. Here is their tweet announcing it today. Only rarely are individuals summoned for acts of national rescue, but in July, Vice President Kamala Harris received one of those calls. With President Joe Biden's decision to end his re-election campaign, the world looked to Harris with hopes and doubts. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you want an indication of how big the bubble is in America, it's the act that people are stunned Vogue would do this. That's such garbage. The Atlantic says it's making a rare endorsement. The Atlantic endorsed Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, now Kamala Harris. How is it a rare endorsement? The last 3 elections in a row, they're endorsing someone. The New York Times endorsing Kamala Harris, and they think it matters. And this is the thing. The Vogue, the Atlantic, and the New York Times thinks that they matter. They matter to such a small subset of neurotics in America who are dealing with mental illness. They don't matter to anyone else. People are not going to be surprised to see Kamala Harris on Vogue because they know Vogue is an institution of the left. And in being an institution of the left, Vogue is going to do what it can to promote it. And you know what's going to happen is it will further alienate people who are not on the left. The New York Times endorsing Kamala Harris, the New York Times is never going to endorse a Republican. If Jesus Christ himself ran as a Republican, the New York Times would endorse Satan. Atlantic magazine is not going to endorse any Republican. If Mitt Romney were running against Kamala Harris, the New York Times would endorse Kamala Harris and say Mitt Romney is a racist bigot. And that's the thing that the reporters out there in the press corps and the Democratic elite and the elite institutions do not understand. Republicans remember how they loved John McCain until he ran against Barack Obama and they turned on him and vilified him as a racist. Republicans remember when they vilified Mitt Romney and only began to praise Mitt Romney when he stood up to Donald Trump. Republicans remember when they vilified George W. Bush as a racist. Every Republican is a racist, a bigot, and a misogynist when it comes to running against a Democrat. And only when a Republican stands up to their own Republican side are they lionized. Y'all, I was regularly on Meet the Press until I came out in 2020 and said I would support Donald Trump. The moment I took a stand in favor of Donald Trump, no more, not on that show. In fact, a whole lot of news programs they used to have me on, the moment I said I'd support Trump, took me off. They were perfectly fine having me on as a Republican who would criticize Trump and everyone else for that matter. But the moment I said, you know what, I can criticize him, but I'm going to support him. We can't have that. We can't have those sorts of voices on. It's the same thing the media does with pro-lifers. You put on pro-lifers, they always want a pro-life man against a woman. God forbid you ever have a pro-life woman defend the position. They try to stack the deck, and they do not realize how irrelevant they are to the conversations of Americans anymore.
Local news interviews, town halls, it just seems like it doesn't feel like October with the schedules I'm looking at for both of them, but I kind of think he has the edge right now.
That's Jake Tapper on CNN saying, well, why isn't she barnstorming the country right now? He's neither of them are doing a heavy schedule, but he's got he has the lead right now. He's doing more events. He's out there. She's not doing town halls. She's not doing press conferences. She's not doing events. And by the way, when she does events, they continue to be small, and they're trying to tell themselves that her small turnout is a psychological thing, and Democrats have jobs and blah, 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 blah. And no, this is not the sign of a healthy campaign. And now they've trotted out Barack Obama and Bill Clinton finally, but they've trotted them out at a time that people are worried about the hurricane. Like Bill Clinton is coming to Georgia and North Carolina at a time that they're digging out from a hurricane. Your news cycle is going, y'all, I realize like psychologically we got 25, 26 days left in the campaign, but as someone who's run campaigns, I can tell you have 15 days. Why? You have to get your ads up. You have to get your mail out and delivered, and that takes time. You have last-minute events and rallies. The window for voter registration ends in another week. You got to do all of these things right now, and the Harris campaign's not doing this stuff. And then they trot out Barack Obama, and it's just it's wild to me. Okay, so you know what? Let me. I was going to get into the Obama stuff. Let me do this first. So, in a campaign for office, and shut up, Philip. Whenever I do this, I'll say you really need to write a book on how to run for office. Those books are written. Maybe that should be my next book because I know how to do this. But so you start. When do you start planning your campaign? You start in reverse chronological order. You first of all, you start on election day. On election day, the candidates some of them are going to be doing early morning, particularly if you're a presidential candidate. If you're a presidential candidate, you're going to start your day very early on election day, and you're going to go to some swing states on the East Coast very early. So you're going to do, for example, find your necessary states. Let's say you're Harris. You've given up on Georgia. Let's say both give me. You're going to start in Pennsylvania. You're going to do an early event in Philadelphia on the Philadelphia side. You're going to fly very quickly over to the Pittsburgh side. Then you're going to hop to maybe if it's Harris, you're going to Michigan. If it's Trump, you're going to Las Vegas. And with the way the time change works, you can get on a plane in Pittsburgh, because I've done this from Atlanta. Let's say you wrap up your rally at 10 a.m. You get on your plane and you fly to Las Vegas, and you can do your rally, or send J.D. Vance, and you go somewhere else. And then you do that rally quick, and you get on the plane, and you go to where you're going for the rest of the day. And by then, it's going to be the evening when you land. But on the plane, you're working phones, you're calling people, you're doing interviews remote, however you're doing it. And then you get to where you're going. You start there. Now, what are you doing the day before? The day before you're doing rallies. So your rallies. The Saturday before the election is the end of your news. All of your ads are now placed. All of your mail is out the door. Your volunteers are phone banking. And you plan your campaign. You rewind a year and a half before. And you're analyzing precincts. How many votes turned out 4 years ago? What is the growth of the precinct population-wise or decline of the precinct? So how many votes do I need to get that precinct now? Now I'm going to get my team in order in these states, and these teams are going to organize the counties, and in the counties they're going to have a team. The county teams are going to organize the precincts, and they're going to find volunteers, and how many people can I put on the payroll, and what is my budget, and can I make these people employees so I'm paying them to knock on doors for me, and what is the messaging, and you're going to do the polling, and what's going to persuade people. Now the downside for Kamala Harris is she inherited the Biden campaign. So she's only had really a month and a half, 2 months to get this done. But she inherited a campaign apparatus. The problem is she inherited one of the worst campaign apparati ever. And I want to say this. Don't hate me from the right or from Trump campaign for saying this. This is just the reality. Kamala Harris is on the verge of losing this election in part because she inherited the worst presidential campaign team in years. The Kamala Harris campaign team is the Joe Biden campaign team supplemented by an Obama campaign team that came in knowing the Biden campaign team are some of the worst, most incompetent people to run a presidential campaign ever. And the people who are on the Biden team knew the Obama team didn't like them. And then Kamala Harris, on top of it all, brought in part of her family to help run things. And everybody knows those people are idiots. Her entire campaign is a reflection of her indecision, her arrogance, her incompetence, her inability to do the work, to rely on other people and make those people the fall guy. Her campaign is a reflection of her. But on top of that, it's also a reflection of a dementia-addled old man who they tried to cover and keep out of the limelight. And on top of that, this is not a competent campaign. If she's able to pull this off, this is another reason that Trump has an advantage right now, because that campaign team is so bad. If Kamala Harris is able to pull it off, it will be something for the history books, and it will tell you a couple of things. One, that Republicans blew a historic opportunity to find a better candidate that more people liked, and two, that so many people found January 6th disqualifying, they had to go for Harris. And that's it. And the reason is because all of the issues favor Donald Trump, and that's why he should win. The issues and the campaign organization, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita have overwhelmed. So, by the way, do you remember when Kamala Harris enters the scene, Donald Trump kind of seems like he's lost it. The campaign is not firing all cylinders, and you suddenly have this, they need to get rid of Susie Wiles. They need to get rid of Chris LaCivita. And I was the one guy in conservative radio saying, no, this is not a problem with Susie Wiles. This is not a problem with Chris LaCivita. This is a problem with the candidate. He's got to get his head back in the game. And what did I say? I did an entire monologue. I wrote a letter to Donald Trump openly, Dear Donald Trump. And I said, you got to get your head in the game. Stop blaming Susie Wiles. Stop blaming Chris LaCivita. This is not them. This is you. You thought you had it in the bag. You don't have it in the bag. And you need to understand one thing. If you do not win, you are going to jail. So you better win. And the way you win is you get your head back in the game. And guess what? Donald Trump got his head back in the game. What did he start doing? He started focusing on the economy. He started focusing on crime. He started focusing on immigration. And guess what's happened? There are no calls to get rid of Chris LaCivita. There are no calls to get rid of Susie Wiles. There are no calls to upend the Trump campaign. Why? Because this was about Trump and the people surrounding Trump. And notice, you're not seeing him traveling with Laura Loomer anymore. You're not seeing him travel with Roger Stone. You're not seeing him travel with Rudy Giuliani. They started limiting the people he was around. They got those people out of his headspace. And when you get those people out of his headspace, what happens? Trump focuses. So Donald Trump's been focusing. He's been on the campaign. And guess what's happened? Campaign's turned around. You don't have people whispering, it's that Chris LaCivita guy. It's that Susie Wiles. They've distracted him. They're micromanagers. You don't have that anymore. You're not hearing that. What are you hearing? You're hearing that about the Harris campaign. Democrats privately grumbling. Harris is not doing enough. Again, let's go back to the very beginning. Just open it again. The day, Jake Tapper.
She did do a town hall today with Univision that's going to air this evening. But are you surprised that she's not doing like 5 events a day, like barnstorming? I mean, there's only 26 days. Barnstorming every battleground state, 3 or 4 events a day. Forget the interview thing, okay? I realize I'm biased as a reporter. I want interviews.
Or local news,
but
though.
the local news interviews, town halls, it just seems like it doesn't feel like October with the schedules I'm looking at for both of them. But I kind of think he has the edge right now.
He does. And by the way, guess what he's doing? He's doing local media interviews. All the stuff I said that Trump needed to do, he's doing. I'm not taking credit for it. Don't hear me say I'm taking credit for it. It was just obvious. As someone who's run campaigns, this is what you need to do. You gotta get these people out of Trump's headspace. Get them out of the headspace. Surround him with people who are focused on the economy, crime, and immigration, and he'll be focused on the economy, crime, and immigration. Stop all the backbiting talk about Susie Wiles and Chris LaSavetti. That stopped. And get him out there doing local media interviews. They're doing local media interviews. They're barnstorming the nation. They're going to the swing states. He's in Michigan. He's in Pennsylvania. And he's even going to California and New York to help the House Republicans. And, of course, the Democrats misunderstand what he's doing. The Democrats are like, what an arrogant SOB thinking he can win those states. He may be saying that when he's on stage, but he's there for the House Republicans. And the Democrats behind the scenes know it. And what is Kamala Harris doing? She's flubbing everything. She's not out there aggressively. She's not barnstorming the nation. Her campaign is the one starting to backbite. Her campaign is the one doing the whispering. Her campaign is the one where people are stabbing each other in the back. Her campaign is the one whispering about her family ties in the campaign that aren't doing what they're doing. Her campaign is the one doing what you do when you lose. You start doing on-background interviews with the press to cover your butt. And you go to the press and you say, listen, it's not me. Let me set the narrative for the campaign's loss right now, and you keep me out of it. That's what starts happening when campaigns start losing, and that's begun to happen with Kamala Harris. In another week, you'll be hearing about how it's all Joe Biden's fault. In fact, they'll be furious in another week about Joe Biden. When given the opportunity to keep Kamala Harris on message, Joe Biden, what does he do? He defends Ron DeSantis. Yes, Joe Biden the other day defended Ron DeSantis and his handling of the hurricane after Kamala Harris tried to pick a fight with him. You're going to hear the Harris campaign stabbing Joe Biden in the back pretty soon. And Barack Obama, because of what Barack Obama did yesterday, you got Tim Walz generating bad headlines. You got Barack Obama generating bad headlines for Kamala Harris. Yeah, have y'all heard about Barack Obama? We'll get to Barack Obama. I'm stunned he did what he did. You know, the guy who's going to go out there and make himself look good and redeem himself for the Democrats is Bill Clinton, which is kind of hilarious. The Me Too culture. Bill Clinton is going to get out there in Georgia and North Carolina. He's going to do the little fist with the thumb on top and the little quivering, going to bite his bottom lip. He's going to tell people about the future and how it's time to send a black woman to Washington to clean things up that the white guys broke. And Bill Clinton, he's going to outperform Barack Obama. Not going to have missteps. That's my prediction, at least. It's going to be hilarious to watch the Democrats not know what to do with that. I want to play this clip. This is Governor Glenn Youngkin. He was on CNBC talking about Virginia and the economy.
You had a career in the private sector, and I think you have a pretty good feel, even in Virginia, for what works to try to grow the economy. Yeah. Can you, in your view, summarize what this election looks like?
Well, at the end of the day, the top issue by far, I mean, by a huge margin, is the economy. And the reality for Americans and Virginians is the last 3.5 years has been rough. There's been unprecedented inflation like we haven't seen in 40 years. And that has translated into real challenges where Virginians and Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Listen, over the last year, over 500,000 Americans have had to take on a second job in order to make ends meet. We still have not seen a return to the labor participation figures that we saw pre-pandemic, and we actually saw unemployment increase. And so at the end of the day, this is about jobs, this is about economic confidence, and this is about Americans feeling like their government, and particularly their federal government, is going to deliver for them. One of the real observations that folks have to have is we have seen about 10 states driving the entire U.S. economy. We have winning states and losing states, and the reality is we need the whole country to be driving forward, not just 10 states driving the entire U.S. economy and job growth. And that translates into the need for manufacturing to be returned into job growth. That translates back into Americans feeling like they can earn a living and pay for the basics, groceries and gas and their electric bill and rent and a mortgage. And to date, Americans are saying very clearly that what they've experienced during the Biden-Harris administration is the exact opposite. And that's why the economy is the number one issue on the ballot.
Okay. Everything you said there is right. Everything you said there is true. Here is the headline from Politico yesterday. This is the headline. Harris is riding a dream economy into the election. It may be too late for voters to notice. Voters still feel the day-to-day costs are expensive, and thus there's a limit to how much improvement this news will bring for her, says Democratic pollster Carly Cooperman. Annual inflation has fallen to 2.4%, its slowest pace since early 2021, signaling that the price spikes that have clouded President Joe Biden's four-year term are over. The latest numbers released on Thursday add to a solid economic picture that's coming together just weeks before the 2024 election. The question now is whether it's too late for Vice President Kamala Harris to get credit for it. Except, this is something I think that the reporters like Victoria Guida at Politico don't understand. Inflation hasn't fallen. It has slowed. There's a difference. You have 20% increases in prices, and now prices are up instead of 5 or 6 more percent, only up 2.4%. That's still an increase. It has slowed. And reporters look at this and they, oh my gosh, this is great news. We don't have 8% inflation right now. We only have 2% inflation, but we had 8% inflation. Prices never came down. They just didn't go up as much. And when reporters say this, they tend to show their cluelessness and also their partisanship. But also, notice something that Glenn Youngkin said. We've had 10 states leading the economy. 10 states. Those 10 states are where the press corps lives. They're the big states for the most part. New York and Virginia actually has done well. The D.C. area is exploded. California is doing okay. Texas is great too. All the other states, though, they matter. And the press corps doesn't live in those states, and so they see everything as fine. I want to read you this message. Keep the guy out of it. But I replied to this Politico headline that Harris is writing a dream economy. I said, here's why Harris is losing. She and the political press reside in the same bubble where everything is fine while the rest of America has had to cut back because of gas and groceries over the last 3 years. So my correspondent, Chris, he replies, lives out in Arizona. I'm going to read you his tweet. I was talking to a rancher neighbor. He's pretty apolitical. He told me he usually only votes in state elections, doesn't waste his time on national politics. He was asking me about stock market, and I gave him the generic, well, the economic data has been better, good jobs numbers, market's been resilient. He sarcastically said, yeah, because inflation's so bad that we ran out of money to buy things, so of course inflation isn't going up. The government just hired an extra 1 million government workers to make the jobs data look good. So we were chatting. He told me he's actually been reading the jobs reports and the economic data. He says he's voting Republican down ballot, even though Trump's stance on social issues strongly go against his Christian values. But he said the ranching community can't take 4 more years like this. I agree Trump drove some moderates away from the GOP, But you can't talk to average apolitical people and say that 4 years of Biden haven't driven them to at least tolerate Trump for some change. I agree. The people who aren't worshiping politics are hurting. And they're hurting because of an economy that everyone tells them is fine. And what have the Democrats started doing? They've started lecturing everybody. Democrats have given up on persuading people. They're lecturing people. If you don't like the economy, it's just because you're a Trump moron. If you don't like the economy, it's because you're a bigot. If you don't like the economy, it's because you've lost your mind. If you don't like the economy, it's because you just don't appreciate Joe Biden enough. If you don't like the economy, it's because you believe Fox News and not your own lived experience. No, the lived experience sucks. Y'all, I just paid $13,000 to put a downstairs air conditioner in. I didn't want to, but I had to. The unit that I had was an older unit. It was there before we've lived in the house for 11 years. The unit was probably installed with the home. And they don't make the coolant for it anymore. And it's got a leak, and they couldn't fix the leak. They tried. And we knew this day was coming. We've been having to set money aside. And, we've kept setting money aside, and the prices just kept going up. And we hear, well, you can get a tax credit next year. Well, that tax credit may help me next year, but it doesn't help me right now. I mean, I make a good salary. But at the same time, we've been having to set this money aside now for a while. And twice they've had to come add new coolant. And every time they come, they keep telling me it's harder and harder to get this coolant. The Biden administration has regulated this stuff. You got to go with these new models. And look, we've got a great air conditioning company that we work with. We knew this day was coming. The ultimate price was more than we had set aside because the price of just the air conditioning unit has gotten so expensive. The price of the coolant's expensive. And I make a good living. Think about the middle class family that's got to replace their air conditioning unit because of the regulations of the Biden administration have driven up the cost. They can't replace old parts with their old unit because they are not allowed to put in that coolant anymore because of the Biden administration. Think about the people in the cost of groceries, or your roof, or you need a new water heater. Democrats who are well off in coastal cities don't relate to the rest of America anymore. And they have embraced a level of progressive paternalism that this is really good for the environment, and because it's good for the environment, it's good for you. Your costs may go up. Your air conditioner may not heat as well or cool as well, but you'll get a tax credit next year, and this is going to save the planet, so it's going to save you. And go eat some bugs, by the way. Go eat some bugs. Give up your cows and eat cockroaches. That's the vision of the Democratic elite for America. Who wants that? It's some dystopian nightmare where these Democrats get to exempt themselves. There was a study, a survey of Harvard upperclassmen. The overwhelming majority of them actually want to use the government to force you to give up eating meat, to force you to get out of your gas car, to force you to give up your way of life. And you know why they're comfortable with that? You all know why. Because they know they're not going to have to. They want to burden the working class. They want to burden the poor because they know they got the money. They'll be able to get a steak. They're not worried about it. They'll be able to get their red wine. They're not worried about it. They'll be able to live luxuriously in cool places. They won't have to eat cockroaches. That's for the poor. That's for the middle class, not for them. And there's a visceral reaction to that in the country. It's something the Democrats forgot. The Democrats have abandoned the working class for an elite who know the rules don't apply to them. And it's not changing anytime soon. As the upper income, highly educated white people become Democrats, it's only going to get worse. And so there is this backlash. And it's not just the working class. There are enough people in the professional class who went to college, to a state school on their own merit. They didn't have a family who had gone. They weren't legacies. And they resent these people as well. They resent the guy who got into Harvard because his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather went there. And this guy is a cokehead alcoholic in high school, but gets into Harvard, gets straight A's, and gets a great job where he can continue to live his drug-fueled lifestyle. And you got to bust your butt. You went to state school. You're working at the same company as this guy. And that guy has the country club membership and has all the connections because of his last name, not because of himself. And you're having to earn it. You resent like hell that guy. And that guy's voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because it's good for you. And he wants to lecture you about your lived experience in your life when you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. For them to tell you the economy is good and that inflation has gone down, does it feel like inflation's gone down to you? It may feel like the price of your groceries isn't going up as much as it was, but the prices are still going up. Has your income kept up? I bet it hasn't. They haven't been willing to be honest about the economic situation of the country because if they're honest about it, they have no justification for electing Kamala Harris. So they have to lie with vigor and hope that you believe it. It's the same way you got people on the right lying about the government controlling the weather and steering hurricanes. It's just a lie they're trying to get you to embrace because if they can get you to embrace it, they know they've got you. And the Democratic lie is that everything is fine with the economy. And if you don't like it, it's just because you've been listening to conservative talk radio and Fox News and everything is fine. It's fine for them. It's always been fine for them. But it hasn't been fine for anyone else for quite a while. And they don't appreciate that. And they can't acknowledge that because if they did, they would have to acknowledge the failure of their positions. And they will never acknowledge their failure. If Kamala Harris does lose, they will never acknowledge how bad her campaign was. It'll be the Russians, it'll be the lies, it'll be the disinformation, it'll be Twitter, it'll be Elon Musk, it'll be everything but her because they cannot acknowledge their own lies, faults, and the things they tell themselves to keep themselves curled up at night. It's Friday. It's 2:37 p.m. Eastern if you're listening live. I waited. I'm going to do this. I've decided. I want to begin with a piece. You know, the Atlantic's gotten pretty progressive these days, but occasionally they have some good stuff. I want to read for you a portion of an article. Now, I'm not a subscriber. I can only read you the beginning, but you'll get the point of it. It's by Charlie Wartzel. The truth is, it's getting harder to describe the extent to which a meaningful percentage of Americans have disassociated from reality. As Hurricane Milton churned across the Gulf of Mexico, I saw an onslaught of outright conspiracy theorizing and utter nonsense racking up millions of views across the internet. The posts would be laughable if they weren't taken by many people as gospel. Among them, InfoWars' Alex Jones, who claimed that Hurricanes Milton and Helene were weather weapons unleashed on the East Coast by the U.S. government, and truth seeker accounts on X that posted photos of condensation trails in the sky to baselessly allege that the government was spraying Florida ahead of Hurricane Milton in order to ensure maximum rainfall, just like they did over Asheville. As Milton made landfall, causing a series of tornadoes, a verified account on X reposted a TikTok video of a massive funnel cloud with the caption, "What is happening to Florida?" The clip, which was eventually removed but had been viewed 662,000 times as of yesterday evening, turned out to be from a video of a CGI tornado that was originally published months ago. Scrolling through these platforms, watching them fill with false information, harebrained theories, and doctored images, all while panicked residents boarded up their houses, struggled to evacuate, and prayed that their worldly possessions wouldn't be obliterated overnight, offered a portrait of American discourse almost too bleak to reckon with heads on. And then he adds this conclusion. As two catastrophic storms upended American cities, a patchwork network of influencers and fake news peddlers have done their best to sow distrust, stoke resentment, and interfere with relief efforts. But this is more than just a misinformation crisis. To watch as real information is overwhelmed by crank theories and public servants battle death threats is to confront two alarming facts. First, that a durable ecosystem exists to ensconce citizens in an alternative reality, and second, that the people consuming and amplifying those lies are not helpless dupes, but willing participants. It's absolutely true. You know, I'm from the South. I've been through a lot of hurricanes. Very big hurricanes sometimes weaken before they come on shore. One prominent alt-right person was alleging some level of government lies and conspiracy because Hurricane Milton got up to Category 5 and weakened to Category 3 when they came on shore. I saw another person, true story, take that data and suggest the government had a dial where they were cranking up and down the hurricane. Oh, we got it too strong, got to lower it. How do these things work? How do these things work? It's a problem, and one of the common things that pains me are the number of people who push this stuff, who call themselves Christians or Jesus is King and things like that. I heard Tim Keller. I was listening to a Tim Keller sermon the other day, and I mentioned it to y'all the other day, that when he's writing Ephesians, he gets into Ephesians 4, and he starts giving like practical instructions for living. And he says this, so I tell you and insist on it in the Lord that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking. They're darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they've given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they're full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you've learned. When you heard about Christ, were taught in him in accordance with the truth in Jesus. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, and to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are members of one body. Forget the Jesus stuff if you're not a believer. Just meditate on this one single sentence. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. Every bit of your life, from when you wake up to go to bed to when you go to bed, throughout your entire sleep, is theological. Every bit of it. This is not me being Jesus preaching here. This is me making a very specific point that you've got to understand. Your entire life has a theology. Every single one of you has a cosmogony. A cosmogony is a theory for the creation of your universe. The cosmogony of a Christian or a Jew is found in Genesis 1. God made everything, and last day of creation, he made us. Your cosmogony may be Charles Darwin. There was a Big Bang. You don't know what was before the Big Bang, but the Big Bang ordered everything. A random confluence of events. The collision of atoms over time creates all things, and there's evolution and the like. But you have a worldview that derives from a cosmogony of how things were made, and all of this together is your theology. What is theology ultimately? What is it ultimately? There was I forget the guy's name, is a famous theologian, I think the 1600s, who said, theology is the science of living well. And we are not a well society. And why aren't we a well-ordered society? Why isn't our society well? Why aren't we mentally healthy? Because we have a bad theology. Each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, as for we are all members of one body. It becomes hard to speak truthfully when you yourself have been deluded by what you see on the internet. The more people are on social media, I think the more broken they get. One of the questions I get asked most these days is how do I know this isn't true? Or I've trusted this person for so long, they're telling me this, it must be true. People are being lied to, people are abusing it. And what you need to understand is what did Satan do? Everybody likes to talk about demon possession. The demons have possessed you. You know what the devil does? What he did from the very beginning, he lied. He lied. That's what he does. He lies. The prince of darkness is the prince of the air, and over the airwaves the lies go. And they're lying on social media. These people are of the devil. It doesn't matter their political philosophy. It doesn't matter their partisanship. They are of the devil. If their existence is to lie, and let me tell you, their incentive to lie is financial, because the more clicks you get on Twitter now, if you have a monetized account, you get paid. So you put up salacious, scary videos, CGI videos of tornadoes, conspiracy theories about the government and all these things, and you get a lot of money for it. And a lot of you believe it. I can't tell you the number of times people say, but what the government's doing is wrong. What FEMA's doing is bad. Okay, what FEMA's doing is bad, but what you're hearing about online, the things you're citing as proof of that badness, they're all lies. There are problems, but people are being exaggerated to and lied to. All of our life is theology, the science of living well. And when you have a well-ordered theology, you live well. And when your theology begins to break, and how does it break? You begin to disconnect it from an actual divine and make other things divine, politics, yourself, what have you. And you break down this one thing. So Paul in Ephesians 4, he starts off essentially that you heard about the faith, you've embraced the faith, you have to have new attitudes in your mind to put on your whole self. And then what is his very first practical thing? His very first, the practical application of what it means to take in real faith is stop lying to your neighbor. That the very first part. Ephesians 4:25, he goes through this entire, the headline that is put in later, obviously, by editors, instructions for Christian living, but it starts off very theological, very theological. These other people given over to sensuality, you've embraced Jesus, you know who Jesus is, blah, 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 blah. What is the very first practical application? It applies whether you're a believer or not, and it is, therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. You got to speak the truth. And if you're on Twitter ingesting lies and you can't discern that it's lies, you're going to start speaking lies and you're not even going to know it. That's what's happening. So many people are hearing about things. I saw this video of this woman who tells me she saw this stuff. Now, keep in mind, it's like I mentioned this the other day, Bigfoot. All these people say they've seen Bigfoot. Everybody has a camera in their pocket now. And nobody can get a picture of Bigfoot. All these people are filming themselves saying, y'all are never going to believe what happened to me up there on the mountain when FEMA came up. But they don't actually have a video of FEMA doing it. They're just telling you. How do you even know they're on a mountaintop? Our brains are breaking because of social media. We would all be better off if we got off Facebook and Twitter. I try to spend less time on it these days. And man, I get people all the time saying, "Did you see what this guy said?" Like Gateway Pundit. Good Lord! The moment someone tells me they read something on Gateway Pundit is the moment I know this is a person whose brain is broken. You had that scandal where Benny Johnson and others they didn't know it. He apparently didn't know it was being paid a ton of money, 6 figures. It was the Russians to push out stuff. The people in charge knew it, but I mean, these people were being paid whether they knew it or not by the Russians, and no one wanted to know who is paying me this massive amount of money. Who is this person? People are being lied to, and at this point, I think some people want to be lied to. All of our life is theology, every bit of it. And if your theology is broken, everything about you is going to break, because forget the God stuff. What is theology? The science of living well. And you will not be well. I started this program by saying we got some of the base of the Republican Party has gotten super stupid, believing stupid things. But on the Democratic side, it's a bunch of people broken and suffering mental health issues. Why? Because they got their theology wrong. And when you get your theology wrong, you can't live well. You begin to break down. You develop despair. It's why people who go to church are the people who are the most mentally healthy people in the country. You got to get your theology right, or everything is going to go wrong. Even your computer can go wrong. Why is this a great transition? to Vision Computers, they can build you a computer and keep your computer going. They're going to save you money. They're going to save you time. They're going to save you heartache. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. They'll build you a better computer than what you get at the big box store. And then they'll give you their 5-star service. They've got thousands of 5-star reviews. So here's the deal. You'll get a special number, and when you call it, they'll answer the phone. You don't get on hold. They don't call you back unless they're really, really overwhelmed. But they know what they're doing. So you call and you say, hey, I saved this document. I know I saved this document. I can't find this document. Can you help me find it? They can remote into your computer. They can find it. Or you can say, my computer's glitching. They can walk you through what to do. They can remote into your computer. They can handle your email setup. They can handle your printer support, whatever you need. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. In fact, if you call them and tell them Erick sent you, you're going to save even more money. Call them at 404-COMPUTE, tell them I sent you. And listen, if you don't have the computer from them, but you want their 5-star tech support, you can get that for just $179 a year. And they will be your IT solution. Call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com today.